The economic outlook for Latin America is one of slow growth, with a projected GDP of 2.2% for 2025 and a very similar number for 2026. We know that this is coming out of this post pandemic period, but what accounts for these slow numbers, these low numbers?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, because it's a very important one. We have been saying, as part of the fundamental diagnosis of Latin America and the Caribbean, that since around 2014, the whole region on average, but it depends, there are differences between countries, is in what we call a low capacity to grow trap. And the figure on average for the decade, for the 10 years from 2014 to 2023 is an average growth rate of 0.9%. This is very worrying because it's very low. It is even less than half the 2% at which the region grew in the famous or infamous lost decade of the 80s. So this is why we're saying, we just finished a second lost decade. And the big question is, what countries have to do to avoid a third lost decade. So going back to the number you mentioned, yes, this is our estimate for this year, 2.2. Well, it's better than 1%, but 2.2 is not an extraordinary rate of growth. It's a problem, and it's an average. It means that many countries are below that. This has social implications. It is very clear that since 2014, the rate of poverty reduction, that we had a good record of poverty reduction since the 90s, went flat. So we basically stopped reducing poverty. There are differences year by year, but it became flat. Also, in terms of informality, very high informality. And we had, in that second lost decade, the lowest rate of employment creation in 6 decades. So this is the background. This is not just a matter of the year 25 or 26. It's that we have more than 10 years of very mediocre growth. And the problem is that behind this low rate of growth is a low rate of productive transformation. If we had very rapid and healthy productive transformation on renewables, on medical devices, on finance, all the different sectors, then the rate of growth will be higher. So this is the situation. We've been repeating it, and also we have a proposal, the discussion about how to do what we call a new generation of productive development policies to dynamize growth.
How are U.S. tariffs affecting the region now? Are there any positives here? I mean, perhaps some new markets that may open up as a result of what's happening with the tariffs.
Yes, well, look, this is very important, related to the previous question, in the sense that we have an international environment now that, because of the tariffs, but also because the world economy is going through a period of relatively low growth, and our main trading partners of Latin American countries are also low, So we are not going to have, in the next few years, and certainly we're not having now, a kind of pull from the international economy. The biggest pull, and this is something people remember very well, was during the financial crisis. During the financial crisis, Latin America had a V-shaped recovery very quickly, because in those years, we're talking about 2008, 9, 10, 11, China was still growing at 9, 10%, and was buying massive amounts of minerals of all types, and also food from Brazil and Argentina. So that was perhaps the main factor that explained why the financial crisis, of course, it had a 1 year of very strong impact, but afterwards it was a quick recovery. We're not seeing or anticipating anything like that now. Now, on the tariffs, yes, it's 10% for around 15 countries. There are some countries that have 18%, some countries have 15%. Brazil and Mexico are two exceptional cases. In the case of Mexico, it's exceptional because it has the TMEX, the free trade agreement with the United States, and the United States has said, and this was negotiated, that it will respect the free trade entry of those products covered by the TMEX. More products are entering actually into the TMEX, so that kind of reduces the impact on Mexico, but there are some products that have 25% tariffs, like exceptions. And in the case of Brazil, I think everybody knows the 50% tariff, which is very high tariff, but again, there are some important exceptions that have been negotiated, including airplanes, Embraer, which is a very important export, and including other products which makes the average tariff lower than what would think about, the announcement of the 50%. So it is not good news to have this kind of tariffs. Now, having said that, you mentioned about whether there's any benefit. Well, within this picture, it is a reality that some Asian countries have much higher tariffs, which in relative terms creates some opportunities for some Latin American countries. For Brazil and Argentina, for instance, the fact that there are such high tariffs with China creates opportunities for more food exports that were coming from the United States somehow that could come from Brazil or Argentina that have competitive advantage in some of these products. So once you see this product by product and in detail, yes, there are some areas of opportunity, but in general, is not the best scenario for Latin America, of course.
You mentioned Mexico. Remittances sent to Mexico have been declining this year, and I want to get your thoughts if you're seeing the same in other parts of the region when it comes to remittances.
Yes, well, the remittance flow is very much linked with the, of course, the amount of migrants and the flows, how they move. And the reality and the numbers say that because of the deportations and the oil policies versus immigration, the amount of the flow of migrants from Mexico and also from other countries have been reduced in the United States. So one would expect that the immediate impact of this is to stabilize or even to reduce the flow of remittances. There are some people, those that can also, that going back because of the deportations. But in proportion, the deportation is still relatively small proportion versus the whole stock of migrants. We don't envisage we will see that this, certainly that the flows of remittances would not grow as fast as they were growing before. But we don't think, unless there's a huge change of scenario, that they are going to be reduced by a large magnitude.
What are the factors that make the Latin American region significantly marked by a large and persistent informal economy?
Yes, well, look, there was a study some years ago because the decade of 2002, 2003 to 2013 was a golden age of growth, very much because of the commodity boom that finished in 2014. So in this study, which actually I must say is a book I edited, so I know the story very well, there were 11 episodes of reduction of informality, significant reduction by 3, 4, even 5 points of reduction, which is important in 10 years. And there are many factors that, in theory, there are many theories about informality, what you do, the cost of the formalization, so let's reduce the cost. And that is, it's important, it's a factor. The cost of, the taxation, so let's have a special, like it's called the single tax, smaller for micro and small enterprise. I mean, there are all sorts of interventions. Also, something that the ILO emphasizes a lot, the International Labour Organization, which is to increase the inspection capacity of the ministries, because of course, like in domestic, this is a lot of the informality is also by occupation, and one of the most informalized occupations is domestic work, and mostly women, and mostly very informal. So countries have been subscribing to a convention of the. So if you do labor inspection, you can improve that, etc. But what we found is that the biggest factor explaining was the high rate of growth in those years. And that is not surprising, because to actually reduce the rate of informality, you have to create formal jobs, good, decent work. And the formal jobs are new investments. And if you have enough new investment, you create more jobs, and then you have a high growth. So if you are having, again, we go back to the issue of growth, rates of growth of 1%, 1.5%, behind that, there isn't much job creation, quality job creation. Behind that, you have job creation, but a lot of it is precisely informal. So in conclusion, this is what is so very important, to do the productive development policies, to invest in formalizing sectors, to attract foreign direct investment, everything you can do to grow the demand for jobs. Of course, this has to be complemented by better education systems, better vocational training systems, everything on the supply side. But even if you do a lot of the homework on the supply side, is the demand side. If you don't have a dynamic labor market, then countries will be stuck with high levels of informality. And of course, social protection policies, because one of the characteristics of informality is that they are not covered by social protection regimes, precisely because they are in the informal, not in the formal part of the economy.
Well, and speaking of policies, we know that governments have all kinds of policies to help shape the economy. They're cutting expenses, mobilizing resources, but there are also some external factors they have a harder time with, like climate change, for example, or transnational crime. Can you tell us how both transnational crime and climate change can change the serious obstacles when it comes to economic growth and development?
Yeah, it's a very important, couple of issues there. On climate change, I mean, on the whole idea, sometimes people talk just about climate change, which has a challenge of mitigation, adaptation, but also the green growth idea, which is the fact that, the planet needs more renewable energy. It needs more sustainable tourism, more sustainable production, circular economy kind of thing. So if you look at the issue of green growth, or if you want to call it with a different name, just producing in a way that throws less plastics into the oceans and rivers, that contaminates the air less and so on, there are many opportunities, because all that needs new investment, new equipment, higher technology. There's a lot of new technology, and more skilled labor, so it creates a lot of good jobs. So advancing in the direction of more sustainable development creates a lot of opportunities. On climate also, the investments needed for adaptation, which are, readiness, infrastructure, and so on. If the investments are made, because all this is expensive, it costs money, then also it's, it could be an engine of growth. So I think that's the way that we approach, from ECLAC, and we think most countries are approaching it from that positive perspective, that there is a lot, and in Latin America in particular, this is one of the big assets that we have. We have a tremendous, amount of fresh water. We have biodiversity, the capacity to produce hydropower. There are even, some arguments that Latin America can use this to attract investment and in energy-intensive industries, but clean energy intensive, and that we should use that opportunity. And some countries are advancing in that direction. Unfortunately, organized crime has been increasing in Latin America. Well, let's say in the world, but let's talk about Latin America and the Caribbean. The numbers are very worrying. The number of homicides, for instance, have been increasing tremendously in some countries, even some countries that used to be very safe and distant from this phenomenon. The problem is that you have like three economies here. You have the formal economy, we're talking about that, the informal economy, and you have the crime economy, if you like. Now, the crime economy is very complicated, because there are in the literature, in the discussions of this, an identification of 15 or even more than 20 types of traffic. Is human traffic, is drug trafficking, is trafficking with, species of nature, all sorts of things. Of course, being illegal and being what it is, some of those lines are very profitable. That makes it difficult to combat. And of course, with all those amounts of money, there is different ways, sophisticated ways in which the crime economy penetrates both the informal economy and the formal economy. So, if you are a democracy, then you have additional challenges to fight this. If some governments where the head of state has a lot of authority over many can, have very successful strategies, because he or she doesn't have to worry about the judiciary or, the different powers. But in a democracy, you have the balance of power. You need to really have coordination and dialogue to improve, the way the judiciary, the judges work, the police, the security aspect of this, and the economic development and the job opportunities for young people. Because a lot of and this is the terribly sad issue about this, the rates of youth unemployment are very high in many countries. And this is fertile ground for the recruitment of the organized crime. So it's a complex phenomenon. We are saying that this is has become one of the main structural gaps for growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. It has very high costs, actually, for the economies because it's expensive to combat. The private sector has to, also invest in private security, which is not good news. Even the people that have to live behind, gated communities and security and so on. So it's a very serious challenge.
It seems that everywhere we turn these days, we hear about artificial intelligence and AI. And I'd love to get your thoughts on, the outlook for the future, if you think that AI could have a big impact on Latin America's economy.
Yes, indeed. I think this is a very new phenomenon. We used to work for years. We were and have been and continue to work on digital transformation. But when you used to work on digital transformation 3 years ago, before this revolution of AI was almost different. Now we have this whole new dimension of AI, which continues to revolutionize this area. So we have, for instance, a yearly conference, which is called the ECLAC, that has developed all the countries. It's one of our intergovernmental bodies, and they have, since at least 8 years ago, a digital transformation agenda with orientation. There's a comparing good practices and so on. And of course, now in this conference and this conversation, the AI subject has entered big time. There are tremendous opportunities. There's no doubt, for using AI in the private sector, in the companies. We have the figures. In fact, we have a partnership with a university in Chile, and other partners are joining. And we are about to publish now in October the 3rd issue of the Index of Artificial Intelligence of Latin America and the Caribbean, that has a number of dimensions and ranks the countries by the degree of preparedness about AI. Look, there are enormous opportunities across all the sectors, in education, in health, in productive sector, in digital government. AI can help tremendously to improve the quality and the effectiveness of public policy. But also there are risks and challenges, and which are, I think, well known, but it is important to continue different exercises. UNESCO is leading one of these exercises to think hard about how to regulate to reduce the risk. It's a trade-off, it's a balancing act, because if you over-regulate, then you can kill or you can delay the progress. So you don't want to over-regulate, but you don't want to also leave it totally free, because AI also has, there's the whole military kind of aspect of it. I heard somebody saying we should never allow algorithms to make decisions about life and death. It has to be humans. Okay, that's one way of putting it. Complicated, yeah. But certainly there's also the issue of how to regulate algorithms in the way we talk to each other through the social networks, because there are a lot of biases, and that's also a risk, etc. So, both many opportunities, but also risks that have to be taken seriously.
Mr. Salazar-Xirinachs, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.